Trains are supposed to be the safe option. That is the whole point. Safer than driving. Safer than flying in bad weather. Controlled, tracked, predictable. You board, you sit down, the doors close, and someone else handles the part where you move through the world at speed. But not every train in the world operates on flat ground with modern safety systems and crash barriers. Some of them run through mountain passes so narrow the rock face is feet from the window. Some of them cross bridges built over rivers 100 years ago that shake when the train passes over them. Some of them circle active volcanoes. Some of them travel through jungle so thick and so remote that when something goes wrong, rescue takes days. And one of them was built on the bodies of the people who built it. The journeys on this list are real and currently operational. They are taken by millions of passengers every year. Some of them are famous for their scenery. Some of them are infamous for their history. All of them carry a level of physical risk that puts them in a category no other form of public transport can match. These are the 10 most dangerous train journeys in the world. The Death Railway, Thailand, and Myanmar. The name is not a metaphor. It is not marketing. It is history. The Death Railway runs between Bon Pong in Thailand and Thonburi Zayat in Myanmar, covering approximately 415 kilometers through dense jungle, mountain passes, and some of the most difficult terrain in Southeast Asia. It was built by the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II between 1942 and 1943 to supply troops and equipment for the Burma campaign. The Japanese needed the railway completed in 16 months. Engineers had estimated the project would take 5 years. To accomplish it in that time, the Japanese used forced labor. Allied prisoners of war, including British, Australian, Dutch, and American soldiers, along with an estimated 180,000 to 250,000 Asian laborers, conscripted from Thailand, Burma, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, were put to work under conditions of deliberate brutality. They worked in tropical heat through monsoon season with inadequate food, no medical care, and punishments for slowing down or stopping. Cholera, dysentery, malaria, and starvation killed people by the thousands. Beatings killed more. Exhaustion killed more. By the time the railway was complete, more than 100,000 people had died building it. The figure for Asian laborers, who were given even less documentation and care than the prisoners of war, is estimated to be significantly higher and may never be precisely known. Today, the most famous section of the route crosses the River Kwai on a bridge that was rebuilt after Allied bombing destroyed the original wartime structure. Trains still cross it. Tourists travel the line specifically to see the bridge and the war cemeteries nearby. The track itself runs along cliff faces, through bamboo jungle, and over wooden viaducts in sections where the original builders had to blast and move rock by hand to create any path at all. The physical danger on the current route is real. Unguarded drops at cliff edge sections. Aging wooden viaducts over river gorges. Jungle so dense that the track emerges from walls of green on both sides. The famous Wampo Viaduct runs along the edge of a cliff directly above the River Kwai, with nothing between the train and the river below except the timber and iron of a structure built by prisoners of war in the 1940s. The track bounces and sways on the older sections. The bridges do not feel like they were engineered to modern standards because they were not. But the heaviest weight carried by this railway is not gravity. It is history. Every kilometer of this line cost human lives to build, and the number of people who died building it has never been precisely counted. When you ride the Death Railway, you are riding on top of that history whether you know it or not. The Pamban Bridge route, Chennai to Rameswaram, India. India's first sea bridge opened in 1914, and for most of its operational history, it has been considered one of the most dangerous railway bridges in the world. The Pamban Bridge spans the Palk Strait between mainland India and Rameswaram Island, stretching more than 2 kilometers across open sea. The train runs directly on the bridge, exposed to the full force of the Bay of Bengal winds and weather. When cyclones and storms move through the region, which happens regularly, the bridge experiences wind speeds and wave conditions that make the crossing genuinely hazardous. In 1964, a cyclone destroyed a passenger train crossing Pamban Bridge, killing around 200 people. The bridge itself was damaged and had to be rebuilt. Passengers who have crossed the Pamban Bridge describe the experience as one of the most unsettling in rail travel. Sitting in a carriage while the sea is visible on both sides and sometimes below as waves spray against the bridge supports. The railway line effectively runs through open water. On rough days, the water reaches the level of the track. The bridge operates with a bascule section, a drawbridge mechanism that lifts to allow ships to pass through the channel below. When the drawbridge is raised, the railway line is interrupted. Train schedules are coordinated with the drawbridge operations. On bad weather days, trains are delayed or halted entirely because the conditions on the bridge become too dangerous to cross. A new Pamban bridge has been under construction to replace the 100-year-old original structure, designed with improved tolerances for cyclone conditions. But the old bridge was still operational for years while the new one was built, and the trains that crossed it did so over a sea that has already claimed a passenger train once. The Devil's Nose, Ecuador. On the western slopes of the Andes Mountains in Ecuador, there is a section of railway that engineers in the early 20th century declared impossible to build. The Devil's Nose, known in Spanish as Nariz del Diablo, is a nearly vertical rock face dropping more than 1,000 feet along the route of the Ecuadorian railway between Sibambe and Alausi. The railway needed to descend this cliff to continue through the mountains. There was no way to build a conventional route down such a gradient. The solution was a switchback system, where the train moves forward onto a section of track, stops, reverses onto another section at a lower elevation, moves forward again, and repeats this pattern in a zigzag descent down the face of the cliff. The entire descent of the Devil's Nose section happens at close range to a nearly vertical drop. The carriages travel slowly backward and forward along ledges cut into the cliff face, with the valley floor hundreds of feet below and nothing between the train and the edge except the width of the track. At certain points of the switchback, passengers looking out the window on one side see the mountainside inches away, and passengers on the other side see open air and a view that extends across the Andean highlands. The original construction of this railway was itself deadly. Workers, many of them Jamaican laborers brought to Ecuador specifically for the project, died in large numbers from accidents, disease, and the conditions of working on vertical rock faces in a climate that shifted between intense heat and cold rain. The rail was called the most difficult railway ever built, and the cemetery with the most dead in Ecuador. Today, the route operates primarily as a tourist attraction, but the cliff is still there. The switchbacks are still tight. The drop is still the same one it always was. The Mauritanian iron ore train, Mauritania. This is not a passenger train in any conventional sense, but it carries passengers, which makes it qualify, and the experience of riding it is unlike anything else in the world. The Mauritanian iron ore train runs from the iron mines of Zuarate in the remote interior of Mauritania to the port of Nouadhibou on the Atlantic coast, a distance of roughly 700 kilometers through the Sahara Desert. The train carries iron ore, and the ore is carried in open-top freight wagons that stretch for up to 2.5 kilometers. The train is one of the longest and heaviest in the world. For people who need to travel between the interior of Mauritania and the coast, this train is essentially the only option. The road through the desert is dangerous enough that a breakdown is considered a potential death sentence in the heat. So people ride the train. Some ride in a single passenger carriage attached to the ore wagons. Most cannot afford even the small fare for that carriage, and instead ride on top of the iron ore itself, in open air, for a journey that takes approximately 12 to 18 hours depending on conditions. Those conditions include Saharan sandstorms that arrive with extreme force and almost no warning. The iron ore dust in the wagons is a respiratory hazard over extended exposure. The desert temperatures swing from intense daytime heat to freezing cold at night. The train has no schedule that accounts for weather. It runs when it runs. Journalists and adventurers who have made this journey describe the sandstorms hitting the ore wagons as a wall of abrasive force, pinning people against the iron sides and making it impossible to move. At least one traveler described the experience as feeling like sandpaper applied directly to exposed skin. There is no emergency stop option for passengers riding on the ore. There is no safety railing. There is no roof. There is just the desert on both sides and 700 kilometers of track ahead. The Georgetown Loop Railroad, Colorado, United States. The Georgetown Loop Railroad was an engineering marvel when it opened in 1884. It solved the problem of how to gain significant elevation in a short horizontal distance by building a spiral loop, where the track loops back over itself on a curved trestle high above the valley floor. The Devil's Gate High Bridge, the centerpiece of the loop, rises 95 feet above Clear Creek and carries the train on a curved wooden and iron trestle that was considered one of the engineering wonders of its era. Trains approaching the bridge on a clear day give passengers a view directly down through the trestle structure into the creek far below. For passengers with a fear of heights, this view arrives without warning. The train is already on the bridge before the full extent of what is below becomes visible. The canyon through which the line runs also produces the wind conditions that make it genuinely dangerous. Wind comes through the mountain canyon with significant force and hits the carriages broadside as they cross the elevated sections of track. Passengers have described the sensation of the carriage moving under extreme wind pressure at height as an experience that inspires grips on armrests and a strong preference for not looking out the window. The railway today operates as a heritage tourist attraction, but the trestle and the canyon winds and the 100-year-old infrastructure are not historical recreation. They are the original conditions the railway was built into, and they have not softened with age. The creek below the bridge has not gotten any closer to the surface. The wind through the canyon has not become gentler. The trestle that carries the train was last fully replaced decades ago. The Aso Minami route, Japan. Japan has one of the most advanced and safety-focused railway systems in the world. Delays are measured in seconds. Safety protocols are among the most rigorous on Earth. The infrastructure is modern and continuously maintained. And then there is the Aso Minami route, which runs through the caldera of Mount Aso, the largest active volcano in Japan and one of the largest in the world. The route connects Takamori to Tateno Station through the Kumamoto region, crossing terrain that shows the visible marks of volcanic activity at every point along its 17-kilometer length. The track passes through areas of lava-scorched forest, alongside volcanic vents, and over terrain that has been reshaped by eruptions within living memory. Mount Aso's most recent significant eruption occurred in 2016, and ongoing low-level volcanic activity is considered normal for the area. What makes this route dangerous is not a theoretical risk. It is the documented reality that the mountain it traverses erupts. When the eruption level rises above certain thresholds, the railway is closed. When it falls below those thresholds, the railway reopens and passengers travel again through the caldera, as if the volcano beneath them is not a volcano. There are no warning systems capable of providing more than minutes of notice if an eruption begins suddenly. The terrain through which the railway runs is itself evidence of previous eruptions. The beautiful, eerie landscape visible from the windows, with its steam vents and dark gray volcanic rock and blackened tree stumps, is a record of what the mountain does to the things around it. The route was severely damaged by the 2016 eruption and the earthquake that accompanied it. Sections of the line have been rebuilt and partially reopened. The train is back on the mountain. The White Pass and Yukon route, Alaska and Canada. At the height of the Klondike Gold Rush in 1898, thousands of gold prospectors needed to cross the coast mountains from the port of Skagway in Alaska to reach the Yukon goldfields. The mountains were brutal. The passes were steep and dangerous. Men and horses died on the trails in enormous numbers. The trail over the White Pass became known as the Dead Horse Trail after an estimated 3,000 pack animals died on it during a single season. The White Pass and Yukon route was built between 1898 and 1900 to replace the deadly overland trails. Building it required workers to hang from ropes on cliff faces to drill blast holes in rock, with nothing below them but the canyon. Construction workers died regularly. The completed railway climbed nearly 3,000 feet in approximately 20 miles, passing through terrain that had already killed thousands of people on foot. Today, the railway operates as one of the most famous tourist railways in North America, taking passengers through the same mountain passes and canyon edges that define the gold rush. The track runs along cliff edges with drops of hundreds of feet. It crosses trestle bridges over ravines. In winter, snow and ice make the exposed sections genuinely hazardous. The train moves through avalanche country and a long track that hugs cliff faces where the margin between the carriage and a drop is measured in feet. The route is spectacular. It is also a track built at the cost of human lives, through terrain that killed people before the railway existed, running along edges that have not become less steep since 1900. The Tren a las Nubes, Argentina. The train to the clouds climbs from the city of Salta in northern Argentina to the edge of the Atacama Desert at an elevation of more than 4,200 meters above sea level. It took 27 years to build. It crosses 21 tunnels, 13 major bridges, and a series of spirals and switchbacks through the Andes that were the only engineering solution to the problem of climbing a mountain range with no flat land available. At its highest point, the Tren a las Nubes enters territory where the air contains significantly less oxygen than at sea level. Altitude sickness is a documented and common problem for passengers on this route. The symptoms, which include headaches, nausea, dizziness, and in serious cases, pulmonary edema, where the lungs begin to fill with fluid, can develop within hours of reaching high altitude. Medical attention on the train is limited. The nearest hospital capable of treating severe altitude sickness is far below. The bridges and viaducts on the route cross valleys of extraordinary depth. The La Polverilla Viaduct, the most famous structure on the line, is 224 meters long and 63 meters high, crossing a valley in the high Andes with nothing below it except air and rock. The train crosses it slowly, with the full view of the valley available on both sides. Extreme weather at altitude, including sudden snowstorms, hailstorms, and high winds, can arrive without significant warning. The route passes through territory where the climate changes from subtropical lowland to near Arctic within the same journey. Passengers boarding in shirt sleeves in Salta may be in sub-zero wind conditions within hours. The Chennai-Pamban-Rameswaram route and the Kachathevu stretch, India. Beyond the Pamban Bridge itself, the full stretch of railway connecting the South Indian mainland to Rameswaram Island passes through an environment of extraordinary meteorological aggression. The Tamil Nadu coastline along this route sits in the direct path of Bay of Bengal cyclones that form regularly during the monsoon season and the northeast monsoon period. The railway runs close enough to the shoreline in multiple sections that storm surge during cyclonic events reaches the track level. Train operations have been suspended multiple times due to flooding from waves pushed by cyclones. The heritage of this route includes a disaster that defined it. The 1964 cyclone, which struck when warnings were limited and evacuation was impossible for a train while crossing, killed hundreds of people on a passenger train. The track and the bridge were rebuilt. The cyclones continued. The railway continued. The risk continued to be the same risk it always was, a train on a low-lying sea-level track, in cyclone territory, with limited ability to get off the route quickly when the weather turns. The Konkan Railway, India. The Konkan Railway runs along India's western coastline through the states of Maharashtra, Goa, and Karnataka. It is a relatively modern railway, completed in 1998. It is also one of the most technically demanding railway lines in Asia, crossing the Western Ghats Mountains and the coastal lowlands through 91 tunnels and 2,000 bridges over a distance of 741 kilometers. The engineering achievement is genuine, but the environment it crosses is one of the most prone to landslides in India. The Western Ghats receive some of the highest rainfall totals in the country during the monsoon season. The slopes above the railway line are steep, and the soil becomes saturated. Landslides onto the track during the monsoon are not unusual occurrences. They are recurring events that are managed through track inspection and train speed restrictions during heavy rain. The tunnels on the Konkan Railway present their own category of risk. 91 tunnels through a mountain range in heavy rainfall country means that water infiltration, ground movement, and the specific conditions inside tunnels during heavy monsoon rain create hazards that constant maintenance works to address. When a section of tunnel collapses or a bridge experiences structural stress, the train's schedule adjusts. When the rain is too heavy, trains slow. The Konkan Railway operates in conditions that most modern railways in the world are never designed to face. These 10 journeys cross deserts, volcanoes, war cemeteries, sea bridges, Andean cliffs, and mountain passes where thousands of people died. They carry passengers on tracks built a century ago in conditions that were brutal, across terrain that remains exactly as unforgiving as it ever was. The train is still one of the safer ways to travel statistically, but statistics apply to averages, and none of these routes are average. Which of these journeys would you still take if given the chance? Leave it in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring the places and journeys on this planet that push past the ordinary, subscribe to Parallel Facts. We will keep going. Why these journeys still exist? The obvious question when looking at a list like this is why these trains are still running. The answer is different for every entry. The Death Railway carries tourists to a war memorial that matters to the families of more than 100,000 people who died there. The Pamban Bridge is the only railway connection between the Indian mainland and Rameswaram, an island of enormous religious importance to millions of Hindu pilgrims. The Mauritanian iron ore train is not a tourist service at all. It is infrastructure for a country that has no better alternative. The Aso Minami route serves communities that live inside an active volcanic caldera because people have always lived there and always will. Danger and necessity exist on different scales depending on where you are in the world and who you are. For a tourist, the Georgetown Loop is an adventure. For a worker in the Mauritanian desert, the iron ore train is the only way home. The risk is the same in both cases. What changes is whether you chose to take it. Every train on this list is a decision someone made. The engineer who designed the Devil's Nose switchbacks, the colonial government that ordered the Pamban bridge built across open sea, the Japanese military command that set the death railway completion deadline at 16 months, the passengers who buy their tickets every morning. These journeys exist because humans needed them to exist. And they continue because once a railway exists, it becomes part of the world in a way that is difficult to undo. The tracks are laid, the trains are running, the danger is still there.